Okay, we're going to continue talking about the other senses. We talked about the eye already. We need to talk about the ear, skin, taste, and smell. So let's begin. First off, hearing. Here's the ear, and here's parts of the ear. We obviously have the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. So the outer ear, the actual physical ear that you think of, is actually called the pinna. That sort of helps capture sound and focus it in through what's called the external auditory canal into this thing, which is sometimes called the tympanic membrane, but let's just call it the eardrum. So sound waves hit that and cause a vibration. And they vibrate three very delicate bones in here. They all have different names, but a term for bone is ossicles. So we'll just call those ossicles. The ossicles then take that vibration and transfer that vibration into the inner ear. And this part of the inner ear is called the vestibule. It's connected to two parts. One of them is not associated with sound and processing sound. That's the semicircular canals. Semicircular canals are full of fluid, and when you spin around or when you're moving, that movement of that fluid in there is what you associate with movement. So your semicircular canals are involved in your sense of balance and movement, and they of course send that information to your cerebellum and other parts of your brain. This is why if you spin around really fast and then try to walk in a straight line, you have a hard time. That fluid is still spinning around in there, and your brain has a hard time figuring out whether you're moving or not until that fluid stops moving, and then you can sort of get your bearings and get your balance. But the last important part of the ear is, so the vibration gets transferred into the fluid in here, and then the vibrations travel up this thing. It looks like a shell or a conch, and it's called the cochlea, and it stimulates, depending on the different vibrations, the different frequencies, different sort of tiny little hairs in here, and those hairs are all connected to a specific auditory nerve, which then sends a signal down this, what's called the cochlear nerve. So the nerves in here go to the part of your brain associated with auditory processing, okay, through the cochlear nerve. So those are the parts of the ear and how they receive auditory signals and send them to the brain. Okay. Oh, the last structure on here is called the eustachian tube. This is not part of your hearing process, but this is important in that when you change elevations or there's a change in pressure can build up in the inner ear. This happens a lot when you're on a plane or when you're on high mountains, and you need to open your eustachian tube so that you can adjust that you can equal the pressures. And that's why if you're on a plane, you yawn or you chew gum or you do something to open up the eustachian tube. Sometimes it's called the auditory canal, so that your ear doesn't build up that inner pressure. But that helps, again, regulate pressure within the inner ear and the outside. Okay. So the next two senses are unique in that they both are chemoreceptors. These are receptors that respond to specific chemicals. So you can see here's a chemoreceptor that is bound to sugar, and it's going to send a signal to the nerves associated with sugar, a positive signal that we like the way sugar tastes, so we're going to reward the brain. We're going to tell the brain, this is good, this is sugary. So one of the chemoreceptors in the tongue associated with taste is sweet. You probably know 4 of them. We used to think they're on specific parts of the tongue. We now know that they're actually distributed across the tongue fairly randomly. The second chemoreceptors are sour, responding to sours. Sour typically means it's an acid. A really strong sour taste might be negatively associated, since acids can be dangerous. The third one, bitter. Many things that have a high pH taste bitter. So we have chemoreceptors that can sense bitter. Many things that are bitter are either alkaline or poisonous. Many plant poisons are bitter tasting, so we can sense those. The fourth is salty. Again, we know that we need salts and electrolytes, so we oftentimes crave salts to get those into our body so that we have the electrolytes we need for our nervous system and our muscles. The fifth taste, this was just discovered about 20 years ago. This one's not as obvious. It was discovered by a Japanese guy, and we've named after him Yamame, which is basically a glutamate receptor. So things that have glutamate tend to be meats, and this is sometimes called the savory or delicious taste bud. So if there's something that's got a lot of protein in it, our taste buds actually respond to that. We've come up with a chemical called monosodium glutamate that is, guess what, full of glutamate, and that actually responds, our glutamate receptors respond to that in a very positive way. So if you're eating something with MSG, it might taste better than something that doesn't have MSG because your glutamate receptors are responding to this sort of deliciousness or this meaty flavor. Okay, so those are the chemoreceptors associated with taste on our tongue. There's only 5 of them, so we basically have those 5 taste sensations. But you know that taste, there's a lot more subtle taste to things, right? Things can have sort of a musty taste or a crispness, and that's the sense of smell. So your sense of taste is actually tied very closely to your sense of smell. Your sense of smell also is based on chemoreceptors that send signals to nerves that then go to your brain. But in this case, we don't just have 5 chemoreceptors, we have thousands of chemoreceptors. So when we talk about subtle tastes, or this tastes like it's gone bad, you might be tasting something actually in your nose amongst these thousands of chemoreceptors. And we also have different thousands of genes that govern these chemoreceptors. So our sense of smell is actually fairly complicated compared to our sense of taste because of all the different smells that our brain can detect and interpret. Okay. So the last sense is the sense of touch. Now you might think that these are just nerve endings that respond to any sense of stimulation, but actually our sense of touch can be divided up into many different specific receptors. Some respond to just cold, some respond to pain, some respond to heat, some respond to light touch, and some of those are also anchored in our hairs. So if you pull on your hairs, it hurts because you have touch receptors and pain receptors in and around those hairs. So our sense of touch isn't just sort of one generic receptor. We have many different specific receptors that are involved in that sense of touch. Okay, so these are the rest of the senses. Again, they're all wired to our brain, and they're all part of our sensory perception, which within our brain takes that information and uses that information and responds to it. Okay, that's it.